I'm Margaret Brennan in Washington. Good morning. Air Force One carrying President Trump has just landed at the Paya Lebar Air Base in Singapore for his historic high-stakes nuclear summit with North Korean dictator Kim Jong Un. That is Air Force One. We are waiting for the president to disembark. He did fly overnight from the G7 meeting in Canada, leaving early and in a defiant mood after a tense 2 days there. A jet carrying President Kim arrived earlier at that same airport, Changi Airport. That's the main commercial airport in Singapore. And he was greeted by Singapore's foreign minister, who you saw there in that photo. Then, as you can see, his motorcade belonging to the North Korean leader drove through the streets of Singapore for him to meet with the prime minister of that country, Lee Hsien-loong, before heading to his hotel for the night. Now, President Trump is expected to meet with Prime Minister Lee tomorrow. As you can see, the motorcade is lining up there on the tarmac as we wait for the president to disembark Air Force One. I want to bring in CBS Evening News anchor Jeff Bloor, as well as CBS News foreign correspondent Ben Tracy, who are on the ground in Singapore, leading our CBS News coverage of the summit that is set to start on Tuesday. Of course, Singapore, it is well into the evening there. Jeff, tell us, how prepared is this small country for this historic, massive summit?
From what we can tell, Margaret, good evening to you. It is after 8 p.m. here, Singapore local time. Pretty prepared. I mean, this has always been a very safe, restrictive city, maybe more than ever right now as we look at Paya Lebar Air Base, where the president has landed. Couple goals here both countries are talking about, both short-term and long-term. Short-term goal, get along better. They already are doing that based on the language that we heard just 10 or 11 months ago from both of these leaders. Long-term for the U.S., for North Korea to disarm, verifiably. Easier said than done. For Kim Jong Un, it is to stay in power. That often means sanctions relief and getting some aid. The president did say yesterday he wants to start this dialogue relationship with Kim Jong Un. He says he'll know within the first minutes if Kim Jong Un is serious. The president has talked about the touch and feel involved in this summit here. Kim Jong Un has expressed a willingness to talk about disarming in the past, but both with him and his father, we have been down this road before, as you know, and North Korea has not always been the most reliable negotiating partner. There's an extraordinary presence, not just of security I mentioned here, which in part you're seeing on the tarmac here right now, but also the coverage, interest from both the U.S. and around the world. About 3,000 journalists here seeing Kim Jong Un leave his country for only the fourth time since taking power. Margaret, as we continue to wait for the president to disembark and get off Air Force One here.
Jeff, we can see that picture there of President Trump waving to the crowds gathered there to greet him at this air base. This is a secure air base where, as you said, there is very tight security. Given the gravity of the summit that is about to get underway, the media circus that has gathered here, as Jeff said to you, about 3,000 journalists expected there in Singapore. The president is walking towards, and who we believe to be there from that shot, the foreign minister of Singapore, Vivian Balakrishnan. He is greeting some diplomats on the ground. We know accompanying him on Air Force One was the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, as well as his Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and National Security Advisor, John Bolton. We should underscore he is traveling there with the president to advise him. And he has been, of course, very central to some of the on-off nature of this diplomacy because of some words he used to describe what he saw as the model for disarming North Korea. He referred to a Libya model, and that, of course, led to outcry from the North Koreans, concerned that perhaps President Trump would be looking to oust him from power. The president there walking towards the Beast, that is, of course, the armored vehicle that he will be driving in to go to his hotel. And as Jeff told you, this is the farthest Kim Jong Un has traveled since coming to power back in 2011. He is only around 34 years old. It is pretty tremendous to think he's going to be sitting down with the President of the United States. for this historic summit. Ben Tracy, we know, is also our correspondent there on the ground on the tarmac at Paya Lebar Airport. Ben, good morning to you. And I should point out, this is an air base. This is not the commercial airport that Kim Jong Un landed at. Why is that significant?
Exactly. Yeah, just a couple of hours ago, we saw Kim Jong Un land at Changi Airport. That's the main airport you would fly into in Singapore if you were coming here as a tourist. President Trump, although has flown into this air base, obviously that has something to do with security. It also has something to do with the fact that there is a major undertaking that goes along here to move the President of the United States anywhere. As these kind of arrivals go, this is a fairly low-key one. You saw him walk down the stairs, shake a couple of hands. We believe, as you mentioned, the foreign minister of Singapore was in that group. And the president is already now in the limousine, the motorcade, going to take him to the Shangri-La Hotel where he'll be staying here in Singapore. But as you mentioned, this sort of travel for the President of the United States is old hat. He flies around the world all the time on Air Force One. But for Kim Jong Un to travel this far today, this is the furthest he has ever traveled as the leader of North Korea, and the furthest by far. His only other two trips outside of his country were to China, one on a train, one a very short flight. And then I guess you should also include his third trip, which would have been stepping across the border into South Korea for that historic summit with Moon Jae-in back in April. But this really is, we are seeing history unfold. Not only that these two leaders are going to sit down with each other, and who would have thought that a year ago at this time when North Korea was launching intercontinental ballistic missiles, and these two leaders were trading very insulting rhetoric back and forth. Margaret?
The diplomacy is fascinating to watch there, Ben. And I should note, the president was asked as he got off the plane how he's feeling about the summit. He said, very good. Well, there'll be much more coverage of the summit on your local news on this CBS station, on our 24-hour streaming news service, CBSN, and later this morning on Face the Nation. Our guests will include President Obama's National Security Advisor and Ambassador to the UN, Susan Rice, Massachusetts Senator Ed Markey, White House Economic Director Larry Kudlow, and former independent counsel Ken Starr. Our Jeff Glor is heading up our coverage from Singapore, and he will have a report this evening on the CBS Weekend News, and will anchor the CBS Evening News live from Singapore tomorrow and Tuesday. I'm Margaret Brennan from CBS News in Washington.
For news
we'll see you later on Face the Nation.